A man in a worn-out jacket was only 3 steps away from the wedding garden when 2 security guards grabbed him by the arms, ripped the invitation from his trembling hand, and dragged him across the white marble entrance while hundreds of wealthy guests watched in silence. His young daughter cried his name until her voice cracked, but no one stepped forward. Then, just as the guards pushed him toward the gates, the bride glanced at the old silver watch on his wrist. And the smile disappeared from her face. Before we continue, if you believe kindness always matters more than wealth, if you believe forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds, and if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue bringing you inspiring stories every day. The summer sun poured warm light across the sprawling estate where one of the country's most anticipated billionaire weddings was unfolding. Crystal decorations shimmered beneath the blue sky, expensive flowers stretched for what seemed like miles, and every corner reflected a level of luxury most people would only ever see in magazines. Luxury cars lined the entrance, reporters gathered outside the gates hoping for a glimpse of famous guests, and musicians filled the afternoon air with elegant melodies. Everything had been planned to perfection, yet the smallest unexpected moment was about to change every life gathered there. Miles away from the glamorous world of billionaires, Rowan Mercer had spent the morning ironing the only suit he owned. It had faded over the years, and the sleeves showed careful repairs stitched by his own hands, but he wore it proudly. Beside him stood his 11-year-old daughter, Hazel, carefully brushing lint from his jacket with the seriousness of someone much older than her age. Since losing her mother to illness 6 years earlier, Hazel had become Rowan's greatest reason to keep moving forward. They never had much money, but they had something many richer families quietly lacked. They trusted one another completely. Rowan worked long hours restoring antique clocks inside a tiny workshop tucked between older brick buildings. The business barely paid enough for rent, groceries, and Hazel's school supplies, but he never complained. Every broken clock that arrived at his bench reminded him that damaged things could still become beautiful again with enough patience and care. That simple belief shaped the way he lived his life. 3 weeks earlier, an elegant envelope had arrived unexpectedly at the workshop. Inside was an invitation to the wedding of Celeste Whitmore, daughter of billionaire investor Arthur Whitmore. Rowan stared at the invitation in complete disbelief because he had not spoken to anyone from the Whitmore family in almost 20 years. At first, he believed it had been mailed by mistake, but the card clearly carried both his name and Hazel's. Curiosity slowly overcame hesitation, and after many sleepless nights, he decided they would attend. Hazel noticed the old silver watch on her father's wrist as he adjusted his tie before leaving home. He never took that watch off. The leather strap had been replaced countless times, scratches covered the glass, and it no longer looked valuable. Yet Rowan treated it as if it were priceless. When Hazel once asked why, Rowan simply smiled and said that some treasures measured value with memories instead of money. As they arrived at the magnificent estate, expensive suits and sparkling dresses surrounded them. Several guests quietly glanced toward Rowan's worn shoes before looking away with expressions that revealed more judgment than kindness. Hazel squeezed her father's hand, feeling suddenly small among so much luxury. At the entrance, Rowan politely handed his invitation to security. The first guard frowned, the second guard checked a tablet twice, neither believed what they were seeing. Guests nearby began whispering that there had obviously been some mistake. The guards insisted Rowan must have forged the invitation because someone dressed like him could never belong at such an event. Rowan calmly explained that he had received the invitation by mail and offered every form of identification he carried. His voice remained respectful, but the guards had already made their decision based entirely on appearances. Without another word, they seized his arms. Hazel desperately tried to explain that her father had done nothing wrong. Nobody listened. Phones quietly appeared as several guests began recording what they believed was an embarrassing interruption to the celebration. Rowan never fought back. That he simply asked the guards not to frighten his daughter. Those words somehow made the silence even heavier. As the guards forced him toward the front gates, Celeste Whitmore happened to glance across the garden while greeting another guest. At first she barely noticed the disturbance. Wealthy events often experienced unwanted interruptions. But then sunlight reflected from the old silver watch fastened around Rowan's wrist, everything inside her stopped, her eyes widened, the bouquet slipped slightly from her fingers. She knew that watch, years before anyone called her a billionaire's daughter, before private schools, before business magazines praised her father's success, there had been another life entirely. Arthur Whitmore had once owned a tiny furniture repair shop struggling to survive. During one devastating summer, a warehouse fire destroyed nearly everything they possessed. Insurance refused to pay. Bankruptcy seemed certain. Arthur had quietly accepted defeat, but another young craftsman named Rowan Mercer refused to watch his closest friend lose everything. Rowan sold nearly every valuable possession he owned, including tools inherited from his grandfather, and secretly handed Arthur enough money to reopen the workshop. Arthur begged him to keep one thing: the silver watch that had belonged to Rowan's late father. Arthur had engraved a tiny message inside the case before returning it. Together. Through every season, the business survived. Years later it became the foundation of an empire worth billions. Then success slowly changed Arthur. New investors arrived, old friendships faded, calls went unanswered. Eventually Rowan stopped reaching out altogether, believing that perhaps some people simply moved on. Celeste had been only a little girl, yet she remembered Rowan carrying her on his shoulders during neighborhood festivals while her father laughed beside them. She remembered Rowan repairing her favorite wooden horse after she accidentally broke it. She remembered him bringing soup when her mother became ill, and she remembered that watch. Without hesitation, Celeste walked away from the altar aisle and crossed the lawn in her wedding gown while every guest stared in confusion. The ceremony stopped, musicians lowered their instruments. She reached Rowan just as another guard prepared to escort him outside. Her eyes never left the watch. Then she gently took Rowan's weathered hand into hers. She carefully turned the watch over. The engraved words remained exactly where they had always been, together through every season. Tears immediately filled her eyes. The realization struck harder than anything she had expected on her wedding day. The man being humiliated before hundreds of guests was the very person who had given her family the chance to build everything they now celebrated. Arthur Whitmore, noticing the growing silence, walked toward the entrance with irritation, expecting to resolve a minor inconvenience quickly. Instead, he saw Rowan. Time seemed to fold backward. His confident expression disappeared. The years of success, awards, interviews, and headlines suddenly felt strangely small compared to the memory standing before him in an old suit. Arthur slowly looked at the watch. His shoulders fell. For several long moments, he could not speak. Around them, guests exchanged confused glances, unaware they were witnessing the collision between extraordinary wealth and forgotten gratitude. Arthur finally stepped closer, his eyes filled with regret that no amount of money could erase. That he admitted, with painful honesty, that somewhere along the journey toward success he had convinced himself he was entirely self-made. He had buried uncomfortable memories because they reminded him that someone else's sacrifice stood beneath every achievement he proudly claimed as his own. Rowan listened quietly. There was no anger in his face, only sadness. That he explained that he had never attended seeking recognition, business opportunities, or repayment. He came because the invitation reminded him of happier days and because he wanted Hazel to see that friendship sometimes survived even after many silent years. Arthur looked toward Hazel, whose cheeks still carried tears from watching strangers drag away the only parent she had left. That sight broke something inside him. That he publicly apologized not only to Rowan but also to Hazel for allowing appearances to become more important than character inside a celebration meant to honor love. The guests stood frozen. Many lowered their eyes in embarrassment after remembering how quickly they had judged Rowan without knowing anything about him. Arthur then turned toward the security team. Instead of humiliating them, he quietly explained that true security meant protecting dignity as much as property. They had followed assumptions rather than facts, and that mistake had wounded innocent people. The guard sincerely apologized. Rowan accepted, because bitterness had never found a permanent home in his heart. Arthur asked Rowan to stand beside him during the ceremony instead of among the guests. At first Rowan declined, believing the day belonged to the bride and groom, but Celeste insisted. She told everyone gathered that no wedding celebrating loyalty could begin while ignoring the man whose loyalty had built the family's future long before fortune arrived. Thunderous applause echoed across the garden, not because a billionaire spoke, because truth finally did. Hazel smiled for the first time that afternoon. For the rest of the ceremony she watched her father standing proudly near the front, not because of expensive clothing or social status, but because kindness had finally been recognized. After the celebration, Arthur invited Rowan and Hazel to walk through the estate gardens. Together, the conversation lasted hours beneath the bright afternoon sky. Arthur admitted that success had surrounded him with people who admired his wealth but rarely challenged his pride. Rowan had once been the friend who always reminded him what truly mattered. Arthur asked how life had treated him. Rowan honestly described the years after his wife's passing, the struggles of raising Hazel alone, the little clock shop, and the quiet happiness they still managed to find despite hardship. Arthur offered to buy Rowan a mansion, luxury cars, and anything else he wanted. Rowan gently refused. He explained that dignity could never be purchased. What he truly missed was not money. It was friendship. Those words carried greater weight than any business negotiation Arthur had ever experienced. Over the following months, Arthur restored more than an old friendship. He quietly invested in Rowan's clock restoration workshop without taking ownership or control. The business expanded into one of the country's most respected restoration studios while Rowan remained its heart and soul. Young apprentices learned craftsmanship from a man who measured success not by profit but by patience. Hazel received scholarships funded anonymously until she discovered years later that Arthur had arranged them without ever expecting gratitude. The family slowly rebuilt what pride had nearly destroyed. Every summer afternoon they gathered for simple picnics instead of extravagant parties. Children laughed. Old memories returned, new ones quietly formed. The silver watch never left Rowan's wrist. Its scratches remained, its leather strap continued wearing out, yet everyone who knew its story understood that its greatest value had never come from precious metal. It represented sacrifice remembered, friendship restored, and the truth that genuine character cannot be hidden beneath worn clothing or measured by a bank account. Before we reach the end of this journey, leave a meaningful comment telling us what touched your heart the most. Have you ever seen someone judged by appearance before people learned the truth? Your story might encourage someone else today. Years later, visitors entering Rowan's beautifully restored workshop often noticed a framed photograph hanging above the entrance. It showed two older friends standing side by side beneath bright afternoon sunlight, both smiling with the ease that only forgiveness can create. Between them stood Hazel and Celeste, laughing without concern for wealth or status. Beneath the photograph rested a simple plaque that read, "The richest people are those who never forget the hands that lifted them." If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember that kindness may be forgotten for a season, but it is never truly lost. One honest act has the power to echo across decades, heal broken hearts, restore forgotten friendships, and remind the world that the greatest treasures are never worn on the outside. They are carried quietly within the heart.